Hi, can you hear me? So thank you very much, Govplace, for having me come here and have an opportunity to talk to you all about some thoughts that I have around this space. What I'd like to do is make this, I always like interaction. So if there are questions, you're not going to see a lot of product stuff. I'm not going to talk about VMware products per se. I'm not going to give you speeds and feeds. I'm going to talk more about some concepts that we see in the industry and where we see the industry going in this cloud computing world. So as we go through, please go ahead and raise your hand. I'll repeat the question, and let's have a dialogue rather than just me up here showing the 125 slides that I have. So, I don't think you want to see that. So first, one of my greatest things, hey, why change, right? That's the big thing. I was having a conversation at lunch. Why do we change, right? Why is cloud computing another change? If you think about it, in the old days, 1950s and 60s, all the people working computers were in the back room. They were really smart mathematicians. They were coding and flipping switches on the PDP ones and coding that way. And we started moving forward. We got into the little higher level languages, and we started building applications on top of that. And each one of these cycles has taken a change. So to us, cloud computing is another change that isn't here today, but certainly something that's coming in the future, and there's a lot of stuff that we can do today to prepare for it. So the first thing is, what are the driving forces that I see in the industry today in the public sector? The big thing is complexity. We have got systems now that are just thrown together and built on top and built on top and built on top, onward and onward. We've got mainframe applications with front-ended web servers that are hooked into it, with a custom solution because nobody remembers who wrote all the COBOL. So what do? We put a web front on it and say, hey, look, we're at software as a service now, right? We can do it. So complexity. We just keep adding more stuff to the fire. Hardware vendors, I was a hardware designer for a long time. We love throwing new hardware out there. It's really cool. We love to do stuff, and we retrofit it. And, that's keep going. You do it in the storage world, do it in the network world. The next piece is compliance. Compliance drives a lot of the things we do in the public sector, right? FISMA is a big driver, complying with local, state, federal regulations, security requirements, certification requirements. So you can never just throw all that stuff out. The commercial world, sure, you can implement something, assume the risk, and go forward. Public sector, there's always somebody looking and said, hey, you know what? We looked at this. We had a bunch of smart people in D.C., usually, talk, which we all know is not really true. But a lot of people look at this and say, hey, this is the way it's got to be. And so everybody do it. Whether those are written 30, 40, 50 years ago, or whether they were written last year is sometimes irrelevant. So compliance is a big piece. Transparency. Right? This is a big one. Our new federal CIO is kind of made his mark on the world when he was at DC and the DC government on this whole transparency piece. And I was telling somebody a little while ago, the federal government certainly has a challenge with this. Right? I just read yesterday that recovery.gov, where we're supposed to go and find all this information about the money, right? Well, they just decided that they're going to outsource that to somebody else to do it because, my personal opinion, recover.org, which is a private site, had a much finer granularity detail of what you could find for spending-wise. And it's a transparency thing. Here we are, the big federal government, the big wide thing, say, there's where all the money is. This is what we're spending on a per weekly basis. But if you start trying to drill down is how does that affect me in a local government, it's very difficult to find out. So this is going to be a driver coming forward. And this is something that I believe cloud computing initiatives, grid computing, and we'll get into what our definitions are, but is going to help with. And the last piece is a near and dear one to me, identity management. Right? Because if you take the three of them, complexity, compliance, and transparency, if we start to remove complexity, start better compliance, and allow greater transparency, we've got to really get down and dirty with this identity management. And it isn't who you are. That's the first part. It's what do you see, what are you allowed to see, and how can I feed those systems so they automatically figure out what levels of identity associate with data. That's been the big challenge lately, is we always focus on, hey, verifying who it is. When you get in the high-end security space, especially in the intelligence community, it's more about the data being tagged. So we've got to drive those thoughts in identity management down to the public as a whole. So those are the three things. And of course, this is right out of recovery.org. And I thought that was great, but I wanted to look specifically in Orange County and say, what did Orange County get? And I couldn't find it. I had to go to recovery.org. But anyways. So what are some of the challenges that we have today? I mean, these are not unfamiliar to everybody. Higher availability, better return on investment, reduce my capital expenditure, increase my OPEX so I can get more out of it, and do it with less, right? Because our budgets are going down. Hardware, you're not having to buy as much of it. And then about 2 years ago, everybody said, hey, remember that environmentally friendly piece, carbon footprint reduction? As you start to modernize your data centers, don't forget about that. Start being not only socially responsible, but also environmentally friendly. Everybody remember the RoHS compliancy in the fiber channel world? Why did the 2 gig to 4 gig happen so fast? Anybody remember what was the real driver? No? Well, RoHS compliance, it had to do with lead and getting cards, get all these components out of cards. Well, what was happening was the controllers, the fiber channel makers, card controllers, decided to move, instead of retrofitting their 2 gig cards to be RoHS compliant, they skipped it and they said, we're only do 4 gigs, which kind of forced the entire industry to move faster. So if you look at 4 to 8 gig today, it's not going as fast. Besides, I don't think you can really drive 8 gig 5 channel as much as we all would hope to. So that's another piece. That's an influence on the industry from being socially responsible and driving new things. So what are some of the trends that we see? So this is an interesting chart up here in your left-hand corner. That's the top 500 computers in the world, top500.org. And you can see 429 of them are based on x86. So as a former hardware CPU designer, I lost, right? Intel beat me. They beat the pants off me, although I personally think we had a better product, okay? But they beat us. They're there. They're dominant players. Everybody's using them. So the entire industry is going to drive that way. Compute supply power, cores are going up. The cores are going up. Power's going down, which is an interesting trend if you think about it, because the trend in the data centers is how do you cram more stuff and keep the power going, because that's a driver for how much you can put in there. Bandwidth increasing, you've got unified fabrics coming. Soon, I believe that you're going to see what we call the air gap between the different fabrics, between network and storage fabric, and video and voice. You're going to see that air gap where there's separate networks and separate wires today. That's going to be removed, and you're going to end up eventually here with a unified communication fabric, which will be very interesting as we go forward. So how do we prepare for that? Are we going to retrofit every single box that we have out there? We're going to have to buy and replace everything?